Good evening. One of the premier ski resorts in the world, Sun Valley, Idaho, has depended for the last several years for its financial livelihood on a local option sales tax on motel and hotel rooms and liquor by the drink. The city of Sun Valley has used that so-called local option bed and booze tax to fund a variety of city services, a bus system, some fire and police protection, even snow removal in Sun Valley. But now, due to a judge's ruling, the future of that tax in Sun Valley and in a handful of other so-called resort communities in Idaho is very much in question. In late November, a district judge in Burley ruled the local option tax unconstitutional. He said that the state legislature had written the tax in such a way as to make it too vague to be applicable. But recently the judge said Sun Valley could continue to collect its 5% tax through February, while the case is on appeal before the Idaho Supreme Court. Tonight we'll take a closer look at this issue of special taxes for special cities in Idaho and the effect of keeping that tax in place or perhaps removing it. Our first view of that tonight comes from the mayor of Sun Valley, Ruth Leder. Mayor, the judge's decision to allow you to continue to collect the tax through February, I guess that blunts the impact somewhat of his ruling.
Oh, it is. It's definitely a great temporary victory on our part. We certainly hope that by using the facilities of the Supreme Court as well as the legislature that we are able to continue the tax because of its needs. However, to consider the limitations and the cutbacks that we would have had to impose upon not only the city government but the citizens of the community of Sun Valley as well as the businesses. At this point in time, with Christmas, January, February are our largest months. That could have been disastrous.
What would the impact be? Were you to lose this tax, which is still possible? What would the impact be on the kinds of services that you're able to provide? Well,
the immediate impact, and if we had not had the ruling today, as of this evening, we would have had to have cut 42% of our $1.2 million budget, i.e., close to $500,000, and that would have involved not only reducing our staff of 16 down to 10 people, 10 employees, 2 of whom would have been policemen, at which point we would, in many instances, only have 1 man on duty, and if someone should be sick or on vacation, no one on duty. We would have completely eliminated all animal control. We would have canceled the public transit system CART, which circulates through Ketchum and Sun Valley at no cost to the tourists and residents. And actually, I'm running out of from the standpoint of, we would have reduced our fire department from 1.5 full-time chiefs down to a half-time chief, and in turn reduced our volunteer training schedules from weekly training drills to monthly drills. And one last but not least, the mayor and city council were reducing their salaries in half.
So major.
And also one other thing which is extremely major in a resort is that we would have had to cancel or minimize down to practically a lack of service our participation in a jointly controlled ambulance service with Ketchum.
I saw you quoted as saying that this, should it stand, would literally bring your city to its knees. I guess that's what you're suggesting.
Well, what I said, and I was saying that with that Sun Valley company in one sweep, if it had stood, that one company would have brought the community to its knees, because they were basically the only ones who would have been affected by not collecting the tax. However, the other businesses, such as the Elkhorn Resort, and there was some independent property managers as well as some bars and restaurants that would have had to have gone to court to protect themselves from our collecting the tax from them because they were not affected. So it would have just been a continuing legal hassle.
Now, Sun Valley Company, which operates the famous resort there, the hotel complex and all of that, the ski resort, they're the folks who brought this lawsuit against the tax. You've been very critical of them.
Very.
Why?
I thought it was, I think that we did last year, let me start again, 2 years ago, we had meetings with not only the political sectors of Ketchum and Sun Valley, but also the private enterprises. And we were going to the electorate to please renew this local option tax. We didn't have a chance to reduce the figures. We requested that they keep it at the 5% for bed and booze, but we promised that if they would give us the tax, i.e. the income, that we would go to the state legislature and try to modify that tax, wherein we would, with the aid of Steve Antone's committee and the local government committee, the entire legislature, we would be able to reduce the tax in percentage and tax more categories of business. We did that. We succeeded last April. Since last April, we have...
let me just interrupt you there to make sure that everyone understands this, that the legislature allowed you to, in effect, broaden the tax and allow the sales tax to cover many different kinds of things.
Yeah, it was very specific. Keep the bed and keep the booze, but then we had the opportunity to go to the electorate and request that any category that is currently already taxed by the Idaho state sales tax, that we could impose a tax there. And by broad basing, the logic of it was that we would reduce the tax. That was the crux of the matter. Our 5% tax with the 2% state bed tax and the increase in the state sales tax, with all compassion, got the innkeepers up to an 11.5% tax, and it got the bar owners up to a 9.5% tax. That was a lot of tax. So we were compassionate. We went to the state legislature, but we got no cooperation whatsoever after what we considered a successful effort, and which would have reduced the problem. And I think the continuation of the lawsuit, while it certainly has merit, and the judge made it very clear to us today that we have a lot of work to do at in the appeal process as well as at the legislature. We still I feel that it was very. Well, it was greed on Sun Valley Company's part. It was just, don't necessarily cooperate, but let's not us pay the tax.
Okay, well, thank you. In all fairness, I think I need to say that we invited the representative of the Sun Valley Company, and we invited other local innkeepers to appear here tonight to talk about this, and they, for whatever reason, declined our invitation. Thank you very much. Let's get another view now of this from a man who sees things quite differently concerning this resort tax. Bill Roden is a Boise attorney and a lobbyist for the Idaho Hospitality Association, a trade association of many Idaho innkeepers. Why do so many innkeepers find this tax so onerous, Mr. Roden?
Well, Mark, I think that the first thing you have to remember is that all of the innkeepers of this state, as well as the owners of restaurants, bars, taverns, whatever you will, they pay all of the same taxes that you and I pay, or any other business pays. This is an additional tax or tax collection process, and I think actually a tax imposed upon the businesses, although it's characterized differently, than anyone else pays. The theory behind the tax is that tourists come into these areas and therefore cause added burdens on the cities, and for this reason the tourists should pay the tax and pay for that additional cost. Don't really disagree with that too much, as so long as everybody is paying a part of that cost. But the only people that are asked to pay a part of the cost of the tourists that come into an area are the people who happen to stay in a hotel or motel, or who happen to drink alcoholic beverages. There are many tourists, by the way, who come into the Sun Valley area. They come there on a very seasonal basis, many of them much more wealthy than the people who happen to stay at one of the local motels, who have an impact on the area, but they stay in a summer condominium or a condominium that they're renting out and getting income on, or that they're wealthy enough to be able to hold. They don't pay any tax. They don't pay any added tax. And I think that they should. Quite frankly, what the whole issue points to, and we have as an industry supported the concept that what we need to do is fundamentally reform our whole tax system. We need to give local units of government the power to have additional authority to raise revenues in methods other than strict reliance on the property tax. But this should be done in a uniform, fair manner that does not single out a particular industry for the purpose of providing this tax. I think it's unfair of the mayor, however, to say that Sun Valley Company is greedy. Sun Valley, if it were not for Sun Valley, I suspect that the economic loss in that community might be very substantial.
The mayor did say, though, that they went to the legislature and got a legislation to broaden this tax, to not make it apply just to beds and booze.
That's true, and I think that the city of Sun Valley has really failed in what they pledged to the legislature when we discussed this issue last year. The city of Sun Valley pledged that if they were to get this legislative authority, which the legislature granted, then they would broaden the tax base and reduce the rate. That would have been a tremendous improvement and a benefit. Ketchum, in fact, did that. Sun Valley has not. The city of Sun Valley has not, and I think that has broken faith with the people in that area.
Well, what about the judge's ruling in this particular case, basically on constitutional grounds, saying that there were just a lot of flimsy areas in the law? That's a layman's interpretation. How do you see that? Was he correct?
Well, I think there's a serious constitutional question as to whether a local unit of government under the present constitutional authority has the power to enact this kind of a tax in any event. And I think all of the cities have understood that there was that potential cloud upon this law. With reference to the specifics of the judge's decision, I don't think at this point it would be wise to comment on it. But I think the judge's decision was was well reasoned and basically a fair one.
Finally, Mr. Roden, I believe that you would have some sympathy with Mayor Leder's problems and the mayors and city council people in other cities like hers when she talks about cutting back her bus service and her fire and police protection. You're just saying there's a better way to fund those things.
Just a moment, Mark. I am sympathetic with the problem, except that if we're talking about all of the people who come into the area who have an impact upon those problems, then all of the people should pay part of the tax. The other thing, as the mayor admits, those are services which are also being provided to the permanent residents of that community who are not paying a tax for that purpose.
We'll come back, sir. Thank you. Finally, now, the view of an Idaho legislator who wrote the local option resort cities tax and helped pass it through the legislature. Representative Steve Antone is a Republican from Burley. He represents the Sun Valley area in the legislature, where he's chairman of the Revenue and Taxation Committee in the House. Mr. Antone joins us tonight in Pocatello. You heard Bill Roden say, Mr. Antone, that this is an unfair tax. Is he right?
Well, first I have to correct you. I'm from Rupert, not Burley.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know better. Pardon me.
I don't really think it's an unfair tax. The people that have condominiums are paying a property tax, which the people who come and use the hotels and motels do not. And they are contributing to the economy. The local option tax came about because I tried to pass local option taxes for the whole state several times, and we could never get it out of the Senate. So I decided that the resort cities did have a special problem. The services required by those tourists who come in there, and that's how come we wrote the tax. I think there are protections in the law, even though the judge says there are not enough. You have to have 60% of the voters approve that, and that's a pretty stiff margin to approve a local option tax. You also have to state the rate of the tax and how long the duration is. I think those are pretty good protections. And I think that the reason we wrote it for booze and bed was because tourists use those facilities. And I didn't really quite agree with broadening the tax last year, because you are taxing local people when you broaden the tax to groceries and so forth. And I think that the tourists should help pay for the burdens that they create upon the community.
Well, I think Mr. Roden is saying, though, that he's not sure that all the tourists who should be paying this really are paying it. You're saying they are.
Well, I'm saying that the people who stay in condominiums, which is one of the things that he quoted, are not paying taxes. They're paying property taxes. And I think that goes toward the support of the local community.
So as written, it's your view that this is constitutional, there are safeguards that protect the public, and that I take it you think it'll be upheld on appeal.
Well, I hope it will. The tax for Boise for the auditorium district was upheld. It did have a little stricter limitation on the percentage, but I think with this one, when you broaden that tax out to a sales tax and people are voting on it, they know what they're voting for. And I think you have to trust the local people, and I always have stood up for local control. And this is local control to require 60% of the people to vote for a sales tax upon themselves.
Well, let me ask you finally for your assessment of the impact if this tax is to be lost in a place like Sun Valley. Would you agree with Mayor Leder about the impact?
Oh, I'm sure it would be quite disastrous. If they're going to provide the services, the local property owners are going to have to pick up the load. And granted that the tax probably in those areas is a little lower than the rest of the state, they are still limited by the 1% limitations, and it's going to be hard to provide the services that those tourists require.
Okay, let me open it up and go back to Mr. Roden. You heard Representative Antone say that the tourists really are paying this.
Well,
even the ones who stay in the condominiums are paying something.
Let me say this. Sun Valley Company is paying all the same property taxes that the owners of the condominiums are paying. Sun Valley Company is paying on Sun Valley Lodge, they're paying on the Challenger Inn, they're paying on every piece of real property, and they pay the same tax, probably at a higher rate because of the commercial nature of the building, than is the private condominium owner. And so Sun Valley is paying all of the same property taxes that the individual owner of a condominium or other home may be owning in Sun Valley. Yes, it's interesting that the law does provide, and Representative Antone, Steve, and I have discussed this many times. Yeah, the law provides for the public to vote on it, but it's not hard for me as a resident of Sun Valley to vote on a tax that's going to be imposed on somebody else. I'm not sure that that's a fair referendum. If you would ask those same people, are you willing to impose a tax on yourself to pay for the bus system? Are you willing to impose a tax on yourself to pay for the chief of police? That tourists will pay also as they come into the community and as they impact the community. I happen to believe that the people would do that as well. And why don't we do that?
Mr. Antone, Mr. Roden got a point?
Well, I think that Sun Valley intended, the city of Sun Valley intended to broaden the tax. I don't know why they didn't get it done along with Ketchum. Probably it was the termination date of the tax that they have at the present time. And there is a difference in property taxes. Of course the city or the Sun Valley Company pays on their property, but they're making a profit on their property. The people who come and stay in the condos are there for maybe 3 or 4 months, and they're paying the tax for the whole year, so I think they are contributing a fair share of the budget.
If I could interrupt for just a moment. I think we need to take this into a little bit larger perspective. I do not have a condominium at Sun Valley. I happen to have a little family cabin, however, at McCall, which is another one of the state's resort cities that does impose this tax. And I have met with the innkeepers and the bar owners and so forth in McCall, and they are extremely concerned. The impact in McCall, for example, the real impact are from those hundreds of homes around the lake of people like myself who go up and spend my weekends there. I go in, I spend my weekends there. I don't pay any tax when I go up there, but I pay a little property tax. But I don't pay for those, and I'm really a tourist in McCall. I'm not paying any real tax for the services that McCall needs to provide. I think we need to get away from the Sun Valley problem.
So you're saying that this is not just a Sun Valley problem, but people in these other resort cities are
as a matter of fact, Mayor Leader and others involved in this issue tried to expand the population base this year in the legislature to include such cities as Coeur d'Alene. In fact, if you read the law, Garden City here in Boise or in Ada County probably qualifies as a resort city under the bill. The bill is so loosely written.
If I'd like to get, I cannot broaden this to McCall or to Garden City. It did come up in the legislature last year, and there was some humor attached to Garden City, I must admit. I do want to clear 3 things up.
I'm tempted to ask you what the humor was, but I won't, so go ahead.
Because there was something about because they had a store that sold boats made it a resort city. The reason Sun Valley did not go to the city of Sun Valley was not able to go to its voters with the suggestion for a broad-based tax was that, number one, as I said, we had to make up 42% of our budget, or $500,000. When you have a city with as limited retail operations as Sun Valley has, you cannot simply pick a percentage out of the sky without having the cooperation of the retail establishment, the private sector, and have some sales figures against which we could determine what percentage we could reduce the broad-based tax to. Secondly, when you have a community and you have a broad-based tax, obviously residents in that community, myself included, I am going to be willing to pay a broad-based tax if I vote for it. such because, quite frankly, why would I live there? I also like the quality of the resort, the place I live in. I like the environment. I like the facilities. I also used to work there. And the third thing I wanted to say about property taxes, which a lot of people I think overestimate, is that of the 100% of property taxes that are paid in the city of Sun Valley, which we certify for about $500,000, Sun Valley Company pays 7.8%, which I don't consider overwhelming.
Mr. Roden?
I'm not really sure what to respond to. They do pay 7.8% of the property tax for the city. Elkhorn, I don't know what percentage would be their share. The issue is really one of selective excise taxes to fund special projects. You have a vote of the people, but it's a meaningless vote because they aren't going to bear the burden of the tax. We have the same thing in McCall. We have it, it was proposed for Coeur d'Alene. We have the same thing with an auditorium district in Boise. Certainly the people will vote, but if they aren't going to have to pay the tax, why not vote for it?
The broad-based tax, more broad-based sales tax that is in place in Ketchum now, right? Do you have objections to that, Mr. Roden?
Well, I still think that it should not be singled out, but I think it was a vast improvement. Actually, last year in the legislature, we did not really object to the broad-based portion of the legislative request. We thought that was a great improvement.
Mr. Antone, yet you didn't like that idea all that much.
Well, Bill seems to be on different tax. He said he would like to have a broad-based tax for all communities, but the one for Sun Valley didn't quite meet his approval. You know, that was people voting a tax upon themselves by 60%, and I think that was a pretty good measure of confidence in Ketchum to vote that tax in.
Mr. Roden?
Well, that's my point. I think that that makes a much more meaningful decision if they're voting on the tax and they know that they will be affected by the tax. And where that's done, I think we have relatively little disagreement with it. I've testified before Representative Antone's committee many times in support of giving all cities of the state, not just resort cities, but all cities of the state, the power to have general sales tax authority.
Mayor, as a practical matter, this has sort of split your city, hasn't it?
Split the city? I'd say that the citizens are outraged at the possibility that the Sun Valley Company was bringing this about, that in turn was going to really endanger the health, safety, and welfare of not only the tourists, but also the residents of the city. It hasn't. I hope and I assume from reports I've gotten in the last couple of weeks since this all broke, that the city is more we're more in a more cohesive posture than we've ever been, and we certainly look forward to having their support throughout the appeal process and at the legislative level.
May I ask, isn't there?
Yes.
Doesn't the Lodging Association in Ketchum also have a suit pending?
No, but let me not get into that. It's been very confusing. They've been saying we will not sue if you will keep up the services, and to tell you the truth, from day to day, I don't know what the answer to that is.
Representative Antone, should this ruling stand up in the Sun Valley case, potentially, I guess it would affect all of the resort cities in Idaho, right?
Yes, it would. It looks like with the ruling that the bill is fixable, so we're going to be looking at it probably. The new representatives from that area have already asked for my help to see if we can straighten it out somewhat, and I need to talk with the people up there about the judge's decision more to see what we need to do the bill. And I'd like to have Bill himself think about how we can get to those property owners, because that's pretty tough to do when they don't, unless they go buy groceries, you know, or other foodstuffs.
But you think you might be able to make some changes in the legislation and the laws that exist now to meet the judge's concerns about it?
As I have read about the law, the decision in the paper, I think it can be remedied.
Well, Mr. Roden, you've had about 10 seconds to think about it. You got any ideas for Representative Antone?
Oh, I think that the specific objections mentioned by the court can be remedied by legislation. I will have to say that I would hope that the committee would really consider, again, going to broad-based tax authority for all of the cities and not give them the power to pick and choose, whether it's a hotel room or liquor by the drink or soda pop or candy bars. I don't think the selective excise tax feature of the law is fair and equitable to the people who are affected.
Bill, you have to have some selectivity in the law. If you have one city put a sales tax on and another doesn't, you have to protect your car owner or your car dealer, because he could, the people would just go to the next county to buy their car if you didn't have some selectivity. So I think you have to have a measure of selectivity in any bill that you write.
I'd like to also point out that
Let me have Mr. Roden respond.
We did discuss that in committee this last year, and I believe it was agreed that they could create an exemption on single ticket items that were not in excess of, or that were in excess of a certain dollar figure, and that was to protect the appliance dealer, the car dealer, the furniture dealer. And again, I have no basic objection to that. But when you single out products as the subject of the tax, that's the feature that I object to.
Mayor?
But I was just going to say they didn't catch them. The only things they singled out were groceries, lumber, because obviously for the construction industry, automotive, and drugs. The rest was across the board. And we shop and catch them too, so and they come up to Sun Valley, so we were in hopes that as a result of our activities at the legislature last spring, that we would have solved this problem as two very, very dependent cities.
Representative Antone, just in about a minute and a half that I have left, Mr. Roden here has suggested that Idaho ought to have a local option tax that would help every city in the state that thought they needed it. Is there really any chance of that happening?
It's been pretty slim in the past. I've heard some new legislators talking about local option, and it remains to be seen whether they'll vote that way when we get there. There's a lot of legislators that talk about local control, but when it comes to voting for it, they just don't quite trust those folks back home.
That's a problem.
Mr. Roden, you know Representative Antone's committee probably second as well as he does. That really not much of a chance, is there, for that happening?
Well, I think that with perhaps, we say it isn't possible. All things are possible in the legislature given a given year. And Representative Antone is certainly far more of a tax expert than I am, and also in the art of what is possible with that committee and the legislature. I think it is possible, and I think there is a growing belief in the legislature that we should give more local control. I think also there's a growing understanding among legislators what the impact of the 1% legislation on property tax and the inhibiting factors that have, the inhibitions that that's had on growth within local communities. And I think we are finding more of an interest in legislators wanting to give some more local autonomy to the cities. I would hope so.
Final thought on that, Mr. Antone?
There's one problem with local option. It's not going to solve the problem in all cities. A city that has another one right across the river, for instance, a local option wouldn't really help them because people would just go across the river to shop. So a local option isn't the answer to all cities in the state. It might help some of the larger ones, which are shopping centers, but as a general rule, local option is not going to solve the problems of local government.
Well, Steve Antone, from Rupert, thank you for driving to Pocatello and being with us tonight. We appreciate it. Mr. Roden and Mayor Leader, thank you for being with us. We appreciate that. I'm Mark Johnson. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.